I have them going 4-13. You also have them going 4-13. So, what do you think about the Broncos? It's been a whirlwind of the last couple of years for this team with, signing Russell Wilson and hiring Nathaniel Hackett and that looking like a disaster. And then you hire Sean Payton, and it felt like the whole time it was just like the inevitable with them moving on from Wilson. It was just a matter of how they could do it. Now they officially do. Bo Nix is in the building via the 12th overall draft pick this past draft weekend. What do you think about the Broncos? Is this a sneaky team at all? But give me your offensive MVP as well as you kind of like talk about this team with the new identity with Nix as now their starting quarterback as a rookie.
Yeah, having them, I mean, again, this is another one. The last place teams are hard in this because we're kind of putting together in the schedule. We're kind of finagling with how many wins each team is going to have. So 4 might be a little harsh considering they won 7 last year, and we've seen some really good stuff from Bo Nix in the preseason, right? But I'm not a huge fan yet of this roster and of the depth on this roster where, at receiver, I've got Cortland Sutton, and I'm not really sure what else. We're waiting on Marvin Mims to maybe break out. We've got Greg Dulcich at tight end, who I believe ended the year hurt last year. Got a good group of running backs, right? Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, I know is your favorite person on the planet.
We'll get to him. Don't worry about it.
I already knew. I didn't even have to start typing in this sheet in front of us before I'm like, no matter what, he's going Audric Estime. I already know how this goes. But no, I mean, a team that really struggled. They had the second worst coverage grade in the league last year. They still have a lot to figure out. The good news is if they feel good about their quarterback, Bo Nix, well, you've at least got a quarterback and you've got Sean Payton, right? So they could be better than the 4-13 I have them down for. I wouldn't put them in the playoffs. I don't think they have the roster to be in playoff contention like that. But we'll see week to week. It's really about the development of Nix. My offensive MVP, and Bo Nix is very used to being well protected at Oregon, especially. They were historically good in pass protection last season in front of him. Another underrated tackle, I think, and that's Garrett Bowles, man. An 83.8 pass pro grade last season was 8th best among all tackles. And I think he's a guy, you could argue also that Quinn Miners at right guard, who had a breakout year last year, is their best offensive lineman. He leans more towards the run game, big nasty run blocker on the inside, going to help them, going to help Javonte and Jaleel McLaughlin find open holes and keep them on schedule because Sean Payton's going to want to run the ball. His best teams have always had balance, right? And even going back to like his most recent era with the Saints, and you talk about them having Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, they want to be balanced. And I think Garrett Bowles though, and this offensive line, even Mike McGlinchey on the other side, protecting a young quarterback, protecting a quarterback like Bo Nix it's big. It's a big thing. I think a big concern that we have, say, with Drake May and the Patriots, we're not sure if he's going to be protected. I feel a lot better about Denver at least protecting Bo Nix and giving him the time he needs to make those decisions.
I think it's a good call out because I do think that Nix will certainly need a good offensive line in front of him. My offensive MVP is Nix, 80.4 preseason grade on 59 snaps, 78.4 passing grade throughout the preseason. You can see it there on the screen. One big time throw, didn't have any turnover-worthy plays. Adjusted completion rate very high, just like it was in Oregon. And that's the thing. That's why I think that he is truly the offensive MVP because you need him to look somewhat like the version of the Bo Nix that we saw at Oregon. And I think that's a big question for people is what's going to be closer to the NFL version of Nix? What we saw at Auburn or what we saw at Oregon? I think it's going to be close to what we saw at Oregon, but I think there are factors at play that would help him be the better version of sort of the Jekyll and Hyde that was his college football career. So I've got Nix as the offensive MVP, but I think just the natural growing pains of a young quarterback are why it's hard to invest so much in this team, especially when you've got a great head coach in Jim Harbaugh taking over with an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert, also in the division. The Chiefs are a duh. And I talked about how the Raiders might be a top 5, top 8, top 10, whatever defense in the NFL, which is going to make it really tough for this offense anyway. So you get a really tough division. You got a rookie quarterback. You're going to be working through things, and the roster is still a work in progress as well. So I think we saw, with some of their cuts, they're going more towards a youth movement. It's a long-term plan with Sean Payton, and I think that it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle in the win-loss column this year. But I think that it will be the right kind of struggles. Sometimes you have teams that struggle and you didn't expect it, and then all of a sudden coaches get fired, quarterbacks get changed. I think Denver's kind of already been through theirs. Now it's just about some growing pains, some natural growing pains of a new roster and younger players. What about defensive MVP? Who you got?
Look, I mean, there's a difference between struggles and progress. Excuse me. You're absolutely right. And their defensive unit struggled last year and 31st in coverage grade. And I think a guy who really has to have a big bounce back is Patrick Surtain, right? And I think you talk about a big drop off. Now, part of the drop off is when you're dropping off, especially in the secondary, in your execution as a team. Everybody's grades are going to look lower because there's so many times where it's like passing off and shared assignments and communication and all that stuff. So I mean, you still see the talent with Surtain because even in a down year, still had 9 pass breakups, and he's one of the best tacklers in football. Only missed 3 tackles all last season, right? So he just. We need to see more of the high-end stuff, obviously, that we saw in 2022 when some people were talking about him as maybe the best corner in football, right, up in that elite category. And he's certainly got the talent to be in that elite category most seasons. But they do need to make a better environment around him. I don't think it's all on Surtain. The fact that he struggled last year, coverage grade, I believe, was in the mid-60s last year, which certainly is not what you expect from him. I just think they need to execute better as a team, but it would help if Surtain got back to that elite level and we go, okay, we have that guy on the outside out there. That would help a lot. I think Surtain, a bounce back from Surtain, along with some better pass rush, would go a long way toward helping this team win more games.
It's really hard to stand out as an individual on the defensive side of the football when the rest of your defense isn't really playing well. That is especially true in the secondary and at the cornerback position. So, it was a disappointing year for their defense last year. 64.7 coverage grade from Surtain last season, gave up almost double the receiving yards that he did the previous season. And the statistic that I looked at is open target percentage, right? Where, you could look at the rest of the defense and say, hey, the guys around me aren't really great. That's why the yards are a lot higher. We can't exactly play as aggressive as we want to. But just the overall open target percentage shows that it was a down year for Surtain because the open target percentage was right around 28% in 2022. It was all the way up to 37% in 2023. So that's not terrible, but it is a big jump in terms of how many players that he was guarding ended up counting as open targets when the throw was going their way. And so Surtain's a lot better than that. He could be a lot more sticky in coverage than that. We all know it. It's just kind of time to see it. So I think that how he plays will be a massive part of how well this defense can play around him. What about a breakout player? Who do you guys are a breakout player here?
I think a guy who played well in Miami last year, and it's going to be a big story with Justin Simmons getting cut and going to Atlanta now. A long-time guy back there at safety for Denver, and a lot of people confused as to why they cut him, but it is what it is. They're trying to get younger. They're trying to get less expensive. They're trying to find guys for the future, right? I think Brandon Jones, who comes in as a free agent from the Dolphins, is an interesting player. 17th in the NFL last year in overall and coverage grade, a 76.2 coverage grade. A little bit of everything. He can kind of move around and do a little bit of everything. Really like him in the curl flat tackling. Too high, can play some single high. He had 2 interceptions against the Jets. Take that for what it's worth. But, I mean, He's a guy they're really going to rely on, and they really need to play well, especially with Justin Simmons gone, who was considered the leader of their defense for so many years. Brandon Jones is a guy I have a spotlight on. Had a nice year with the Dolphins last year. If he can do it in that spot for Denver this year, it makes Surtain and everybody else's life easier on the back end of that defense.
I'm going to go with a different player who I agree that Brandon Jones could be a big deal for them. This would be a true breakout. It was like when I was talking about Benito Jones for the Miami Dolphins. Like this isn't an easy one. I think that it would really take a great year from Cody Barton, their linebacker. Like I think the linebacker room is set up well for Barton to stand out. And whether it's going back to his college career in Utah or just what we have seen from him overall, like when he was with the Seattle Seahawks, there have been flashes of potential of what he could be as a coverage linebacker. Last year, 66.2 grade in coverage, which was the highest of his career. I was kind of shocked that was the highest of his career. I thought it'd be a little bit higher, but this preseason is a 72.2. So I think that things are getting better. And I think the fact that I was shocked that it was a 66.2 as his highest of his career speaks to how much I believe he could be a comfortable coverage linebacker in the middle of that defense. If he can really be that type of a player, I think it just helps out everybody. Anytime that you have a really good coverage linebacker that you can rely upon to be valuable in space in the middle of that defense, it really does help everybody out. And Barton is somebody who I think approaches the game at a high IQ level when it comes to that coverage play. And I think that we're going to see the highest coverage grade of his career, or at least I would love to see it from him. And I think if he is a breakout candidate, then this really helps basically everybody else around the defense. So I like him being in this lineup, and I like him having his best year yet. You know who my best rookie is going to be. Who's your best rookie?
It's the same one. I'm going to mention another guy in a second here, but yeah, you have to talk about Bo Nix, and he looked spectacular in the preseason, and he was spectacular the last 2 years at Oregon. You're talking about a guy who led the FBS last year in passing grade and adjusted completion percentage. And the one thing when I went back and watched, especially this last game that he just played, is I might not have given him enough credit, his mobility enough credit, and his ability to make decisions on the move. There are times when he bails from a clean pocket a little too quickly, because there's still one of the themes back when he was at Auburn is like, okay, this guy's just an improviser. He's trying to get out here and just play like Johnny Manziel playground kind of football, right? I think that's kind of how it was at Auburn. Did it less at Oregon because he knew he was pass protected well. They were going to pass protect at an elite level. They always do. So I'm curious on that, but I don't think I gave him enough credit for his mobility. He can take off and run, and last year the best passing grade in the Power 5 when he was moved off of his spot. So he's a guy, there's enough improv. I think he understands. He's got a really good sense, and I think CJ Stroud has a bit of this too, where it's like a really good sense of just when to get rid of the football, right? Like I'm about to get hit, I'm going to get leveled, like I have just enough time to release this, and on the move when to release it or take off and run. I think some of the improv is going to help him this year, especially. Again, I'm not the biggest believer in their receiving core. There's going to be times where guys just don't get open, right? And that always happens, but especially for them, I think it's going to be a problem. There's going to be some improvisation, but I think his ability to make plays on the move is really going to help. I think he's shown it a lot in the preseason. The other guy I'm going to mention really, really quick, the edge player Jonah Ellis out of Utah. Awesome preseason as well. I think 7 pressures across 2 games. Pressure machine at Utah. Boatload of pass rush moves. 100% effort all the time. I think Jonah Ellis is going to get some early playing time for them as well.
Yeah, everybody knows that listens to NFLSC, the NFL Stock Exchange, knows that I have to shout out Audric Estime, who is, I don't want to say like a bit, I would just say he's a fan favorite on the show. We're just constantly, as a show and as a listenership, rooting very hard for Audric Estime, just because that's who we've all rallied around. And I genuinely think that he has the opportunity to be a really solid player. Had a really good preseason, had 2 rushing touchdowns this preseason. They gave him a lot of carries because I think they wanted to see what he could do, because I think they are willing to get him in the mix. I'm not saying that Javonte Williams is going to be bad this year. I'm not saying that like Audric Estime is going to be RB1, but I think he is going to be in that running back rotation much more than we maybe thought that he was going to when the Broncos drafted him where they did. And you look at the last 2 years, really good rushing grades from Estime, 86.6 in 2022, 94.0 last year in 2023. Pretty high missed tackles forced per attempt average, pretty high yards after contact average, which are the numbers that we like, which kind of individualize running backs and how they are separate from their offensive line, how their performance and their talent can shine individual of their offensive line. So Estime, I think, is somebody that is going to produce, bit or jokes aside that we have had on that show on NFLSC. I really do think that Estime is in for a pretty solid carry load when it comes to the rotation of how Denver is going to deploy their running backs this year. So as always, rooting for Audric Estime, and I do genuinely believe that he's in for a pretty big year.